Hello everybody, it's GirlGotGame, and welcome back to Gilded Shadows. Today, we are starting Reuben's sweet ending. So, our girl has a whole new personality now. She is cautious, stubborn, and analytical, and she did not meet this guy for brunch in the common route. She told him she was busy. She was too busy, so she ran into a certain tangerine-ruining man instead. So we'll see how that plays into this route as well, but yeah. We are in chapter 1, and we're probably going to get a lot more inner monologue from Morgan because she's analytical this time. She usually has a lot more to think about, so let's jump into it. This is the first monologue difference in chapter 1. I swallowed past a growing lump in my throat, refusing to let emotions overwhelm. That wouldn't help the situation. I rubbed my eyes and counted as I inhaled and let the breath out. Once... and again. Over and over until the tightness in my chest had eased and I could continue. Reuben, after watching from the kitchen for a moment, set the mugs down and came to sit next to me. There was only concern on his face when I looked up at him. I feel like this is all different. Yes, okay. I thought so.
Just take your time.
Thank you. Drawing my knees up and clutching the blanket closer, I finally tried to explain what happened. Okay. And that was very short-lived. It happened after you and I met outside my building yesterday. I went to take care of things like I said, but when I was on my way home, as laughable as it sounds, two men showed up out of nowhere and grabbed me. One was someone I recognized. I met him that day in the alley where I was attacked. He was the one that helped me. He told me his name was Ari, and he called the man who was with him Caleb. That's right, that's the other thing I did. I did not run into Jack this time. I went with Ari in the beginning as well at the fountain, so that's another little difference. They forced me into a car and drove away from the area, saying there were people chasing us. Okay. I was being pursued by something. A robot of some kind, I think. I never got a look at it, but I knew it was there. Just... knew. I mean, I could sense it when it was getting close, and I'm not sure how long I was there. My nanosystem was scrambled, so... It was raining and cold, and, after a while, dark. I somehow kept my voice steady as I spoke. Actually, talking about it was strangely cathartic. The soothing feel of Reuben's hand rubbing over my shoulder was encouraging as well. Well, dang. He never pushed me or tried to make me go faster, and I was so grateful for that. After a while, I encountered someone else there.
Another pursuer?
I don't know. Sort of? He told me his name was Jack. He did say he'd also been following me around or watching me for a couple of days before the others grabbed me. But I don't know if he was one of the ones chasing us before we teleported.
Seems like a lot of people were keeping an eye on you.
Too many.
I've always thought popularity was overrated.
I let out a pained laugh. Tell me about it. Okay, and we're back around? Cool. I'm sorry.
Hey, no. Don't be sorry. Ugh.
Okay, this is it wasn't an accusation. Alright. Skipped ahead quite a bit there. The details of psi fatigue, okay. I do that all the time too. Research medical issues. You know doctors hate that, right?
I've been lectured a few times, yes. I rarely have time to get checked if something feels off, so I'm used to doing my own research.
So you can decide in advance if it's worth scheduling an appointment.
Yes, something like that.
I know the feeling. Schedules are surprisingly tight for students, too. I am feeling better, though. A little.
Are you familiar with psi fatigue at all? Last night, well, this morning, you were acting like you might not be.
Okay, are we back? We're back. I'm almost surprised they're willing to paint me in a sympathetic light, all things considered.
Why would you say that?
Doesn't the press always like a villain?
They also like a hero. And there are better villains in this story than you.
I scoffed, looking back at the screen. So I'm the hero here?
A top-tier student with an impeccable record. There aren't many negative points they can make about you even if they wanted to. And it's far more enticing to paint Endgame as a villain here, or ramp up fears about the likes of Crimson coming to the Dayside to attack people.
Endgame might make a more dramatic villain, that was true. But I wondered if that would be true if it was known I'd hidden I was an Esper in the first place. New Albion law said people like me needed to go to Endgame. Did it, though? Of course, Reuben left that fact out when he shared the story. I was glad, but also felt bad he'd lied by omission to save my reputation. Still, compelling villain or not. Okay, now we're back. Cool. A choice! My goodness. So, now, let's see. We were flexible last time. This time we're gonna be cautious. I think this was locked the first time we went through. You did what was necessary, I suppose. That's all I can ask for. I knew I didn't sound keen, but it wasn't a lack of gratitude. He'd had to come up with something fast. It was just too much. Being a spark for discourse on Esper policy? I didn't want to be something like that. But that wasn't Reuben's fault, was it?
I'm sorry for not asking you before I leaked your story. I realize how uncomfortable this must be for you.
Well, in fairness, I was unconscious, or asleep if I'm being generous, so asking would have been difficult. I gave him a tired smile. Sorry if I don't seem enthusiastic. It's been a long 20 hours, and this is a lot to take in.
And you're not feeling well. I know. I wish I could say it's going to get better soon, but it'll probably continue to be chaotic for a while. Hopefully not quite as bad as being attacked in dark alleys.
One definitely hopes. Alright. Nope. Okay.
For now, we'll try to keep you out of the public eye as much as possible. If Endgame and the politicians want to fight it out, let them.
I don't mind letting them fight, but where does that leave me?
I'm not sure. Endgame might usually make an argument for keeping a dangerous Esper off the street in cases like this, but that won't work for you. Painting you in that kind of light will prove extremely difficult, I think. People will have a hard time believing you're dangerous.
Nope.
And to be honest, New Albion's laws about adult Espers aren't as cut and dry as many assume. Right now, all Endgame has as a defense is the idea that you were in danger, not that you were the source of it. So people are questioning why they targeted you instead of the people putting you in danger.
This all seems familiar, but I guess must be slightly different.
If Crimson was the threat, why didn't they go after Crimson? Because they were more concerned with capturing the new queen first. It's not a great look.
So I became a cudgel to beat Endgame up with. I wasn't sure how that made me feel, but it did seem like poetic justice. Okay. Nope, still. I remember her changing the subject, but it's a little bit different still. Not to change the subject, but I am a little worried about my parents. I haven't heard from them, but they have to be worried sick in the midst of all this.
They're aware of your situation, don't worry. I contacted them this morning before the story went live. I didn't imagine they'd want to hear about what happened on a newsfeed. And I thought it might be a while before you could talk to them personally, given how hectic it is right now.
I let out a soft sigh of relief when he said that. Thank you so much.
Of course.
There it is. But Okay, no idea you were an Esper, but
Your test results threw what everyone believed was a false positive when you were a child, and queen ranks are notoriously difficult to detect.
He gave me a knowing smile.
It's a known fact queens will mimic the sigh of those around them unconsciously, even that of normal citizens. So it's understandable that you had no idea.
Right. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to keep up. Alright, explain to me the laws. Right, a pipeline from the Endgame Academy to the organization. A pipeline? I suppose that makes sense if they have the only proper Esper Academy. It would be pretty easy for kids to assume Endgame is their only future. Then this influences the rest of society to assume the same thing.
Exactly.
But what's the solution? Even I understand the need to train young Espers. More schools dedicated to it?
I think that would help. A lot of parents don't want to send their kids to Bray-Sill, but what can they do when they have a child whose abilities are ready to spiral out of control? There's nowhere else they can go.
Even if others tried to step up through the years to offer alternatives to Endgame's Academy, I guess you can't compete with a colossus like that, can you?
You really can't. The fairy situation is making it a bigger issue these days, though. For decades, centuries, we fine-tuned identifying N-class Espers at a young age. And now... We haven't discussed this in depth yet, Morgan, but... You realize you're probably a...
F-class. I know. I could work out at least that much on my own. My ex-boyfriend was studying Espers, so I've learned a little about that.
Queen ranks are difficult to detect, but if you're F-class on top of that...
Several hundred years of world history wasn't going to change all at once, not even with a small spark to light up public discourse. I wasn't sure what that meant for me. Okay, there we go. What are we doing this time? Okay, we were flexible, so probably stubborn? Yes, we're being stubborn now. If I was lucky, I wouldn't be an Esper at all, and none of this would have happened. He paused for a moment, unsure what to say, I thought. I let out a soft, hollow laugh. And I drooped in the chair, feeling bad for causing him to look, well, like that. Right? You could have told him that he was lucky to have run into him, but instead we said that. Sorry, it's just hard to not be a little bitter. I didn't mean to sound so...
You're allowed to be bitter, Morgan, and you're allowed to be angry.
I'm not sure that I'm angry, I just have a lot of mixed feelings. I always knew I could be found out. It was a constant shadow over my shoulder. I'm frustrated that I was found out, that they approached me the way they did, and that others were lying in wait, apparently. That everything I worked for is... What gives them the right to do that to people? What gives anyone the right to think they're entitled to someone because of their skills?
No one has that right. That's the point.
I let my head fall against the back of the chair as I shut my eyes and released a slow breath. For a moment I stared up at Reuben's ceiling, struggling for words. The funny thing is, there's this part of me that's almost relieved, too. Like I'm just glad the secret is no longer a secret. And I'm frustrated at myself for that, too.
I hope you realize it's okay to have complicated feelings about all this. I don't know if you need to hear that, but I feel like maybe you do. And you'll have time to sort through all of that, even through the inevitable chaos in the upcoming days and weeks. I'm not sure how long it'll be before they find you a place to stay. I reckon it'll depend on who they assign to watch over you.
Are you okay with me being here until then? I'm sure it's inconvenient.
Don't worry about that, okay?
Okay, and then we went to sleep. And then we saw him cooking shirtless, so we're gonna be analytical about the eggs this time. Well, the eggs are pretty important. Can't have them ruined by lack of attention. Rushing out to save them from neglect is understandable.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
In any case, it's your house. You're allowed to wear what you want. I hardly have the right to complain.
Maybe. But I think I still need to remember I have a guest. It's probably better to make sure I stay decent, eggs or not.
I mean, sure, but still. It's not a problem, and not wearing a shirt hardly makes you indecent. I'm sure you already know I have 4 brothers. Growing up, there was always someone just coming in from practice or working out or something. So I've most likely seen worse than a naked torso. I nearly kicked myself at that phrasing because why did I have to say it that way? The color in Reuben's face deepened and he looked away, so I kicked myself again for making it awkward. Ugh, Mother.
This is Mom's fault. Even so.
If anything, I'd be more worried about you cooking without proper protection. The oil splatters would be murder. That's what I was saying the first time around. He let out a quiet chuckle, having moved back to the stove to check the food again.
I suppose that's true too. Fortunately, I was spared this time around.
And the eggs? Did they survive?
Just.
That's a relief. The awkwardness faded, and I thought it had been mostly on my end anyway. And still almost definitely Mum's fault. I pushed all thoughts of anything irresponsible or irresponsible adjacent from my mind. Mother. Looking away from Reuben, the news report on the screen on the far side of the living room caught my attention. I turned to it, leaning on my elbows, back to the bar as I watched it. There we go. What's the logic? Okay, there wouldn't be a point in risking going after your family. Gotcha. I can somewhat see the logic of that. Of wanting to present a specific outside narrative for the sake of subterfuge. Crimson wouldn't risk something like taking my family hostage if they didn't know where I was or if I'd be in a position to be swayed by it. But that doesn't explain why Ari and Caleb didn't tell me anything that day. They literally could have whispered it in my ear before pushing me into that car.
Would you have believed it?
No, but that's beside the point. If they had told me and then Jack confirmed it later, I would have turned myself in. Not that... Ugh. I don't want to go to Endgame, and in that regard, I'm glad they didn't tell me, because now I can push back. But from a logical standpoint, if they wanted to succeed, they should have told me. If they wanted to fail, then I guess it worked out for them. An exaggerated sigh worked its way out as Reuben pushed a plate and cup of coffee my way. Alright, and then we ate some food. Alright, no one likes having their future chosen for them. Which doesn't mean it's not selfish.
I suppose that depends how you define selfishness. It isn't like you're some limited resource to be divided up among the public.
Queens are a limited resource though, Reuben. Isn't that why people like Crimson were so desperate to get their hands on me? Endgame can argue they wanted to protect the public, but Crimson and whoever else angling to capture me just wanted to claim a limited resource.
I guess I should have phrased that better. What I meant is that I think there are inherent problems when we treat people like consumable resources. No one is entitled to you, or anyone else. Period.
Are we... not yet.
It's regrettable that you didn't register, yes. Like it or not, that's the law for children. But there are specific reasons for that, which I don't think necessarily apply to you as an adult. I can sympathize with the difficulty of that decision. And maybe your anxiety about it was more than just normal anxiety. Perhaps you knew on an instinctive level what would happen. That's also valid. It's not like the last queen rank from Endgame is still with us. Being a P-class myself, I know a lot about those kinds of instincts, how important it is to trust them, and how hard it sometimes is to ignore them.
You're a pseudo-Esper?
Well, it's not as great as it sounds. It's sometimes a little useful. Good instincts and all that. But that pit I get in my stomach when I know something is wrong, or when I know someone is lying, is incredibly hard to ignore. It's this kernel of worry that follows me and dogs my thoughts for days, for months, Years sometimes.
I never considered the possibility my worry was some kind of, I don't know, precognitive concern, though the anxiety was persistent, to the point I avoided anything to do with Espers. I suppose that is a little extreme, but blaming it on some deep-seated gut instinct seems a little too convenient. Music change? Music change! There we go. Alright, I'm gonna go on a hunch and say analytical for this? Yes. Alright, tell me about your conspiracy theories and how much is actually real? I mean, I suppose my question is, how much of what you research is real, though? I mean, versus rumor and speculation.
That's always the question, isn't it? But for the record, rumors and speculations aren't always false.
They're just unverifiable.
Sometimes. And sometimes you find evidence swaying you one way or the other.
Do you ever find evidence beyond rumors? I mean, direct evidence?
Depends on the case. But it's not like I'm unaware a lot of it is circumstantial. And some of it isn't even that. I may have my instincts to guide me, my latent sigh, but that only gets me so far. There is one truth that isn't just speculation, though. And that is that a lot of things happen in the shadows on this planet, Morgan. But it gets covered up or ignored. A lot of factions out there, Endgame and our favorite government among them, have the power to keep those things hidden. I have more than just circumstantial evidence of that. In some groups, including Utpal, some of it is like an open secret. I don't trust organizations, but I have good reason for that. Whether it's non-public research facilities and projects or shadow domes that no one talks about. If I have enough to convince me that is real, it makes me wonder about the things I don't have hard proof of yet, you know. The night side is worse than the day side, but it doesn't mean this side is free of it. Noir, for example, is notorious for their experimentation on Espers. That isn't a conspiracy theory. It's just something we know is happening there. But the rumors the Delphine government is also involved in it. Less proof, sure. Yet it does make logical sense. It's not like there's oversight to prevent it. And heaven knows what happened to you proves how badly everyone wants their Esper army. If the dice had landed differently, you might have ended up an unsolved missing persons case that was also tied up in what some might otherwise term a conspiracy theory.
That's uncomfortably true.
That's why I question how many missing persons went missing because of similar circumstances.
I suppose I can see how that can make you question everything, especially when you do have insistent gut instincts pushing you to question things.
I don't research the nonsensical subjects like subterranean cities of Thalassans, or that one where the entire planet is just an experiment being run by the Arrayans. I'm not interested in those, if that's what you were imagining.
Those are the ones I'd rather be true, especially cities of Thalassans. That seems like it would be interesting, and potentially less devastating than secret human experimentation. But I understood him a bit better now. What he was describing sounded more realistic than my initial impressions. Although secret government facilities with secret government projects did delve a little more into classic conspiracy theory. But I suppose he had a point when he said there was some weight behind it, especially keeping my situation in mind.
I guess one way to think of it is that I'm interested in possibly real conspiracies that are affecting the lives of real people. I don't buy into things that are designed to target individuals or groups with outrageous accusations. I get that a lot of this stuff is designed to attack people. That's always something you sift through and filter out. But real people are being hurt by factions operating in secret. That we both have experience with. And I find myself drawn into exploring and trying to uncover some of it.
I can understand that, I guess. And well, it's not like there aren't a lot of bizarre conspiracy theories in my area as well. So my mind did immediately go to a strange place.
That's fair. I'm sure there's a lot more speculating in your field, since we know so little about the history of this planet still.
Basically. I have to admit I'm curious about your research now. I mean, the specifics of some of the cases you've looked into. Or are looking at.
Well, maybe I can share some of it later. I don't know how interesting you'll find it if you delve in. It's not exactly the lost in ruins.
I was much more interested in Senecan culture anyway. I let out a regretful laugh. Okay, now we're back around. Why are we exasperated? Because we were trying to clean the dishes. I froze in place and gave him an exasperated look before I flopped back on the stool, half pouting. Okay, so instead of continuing to do the dishes, she's like, me. He was intent on not allowing me to do anything at all for myself, wasn't he? It was sweet, and I didn't want to overstep in someone else's home. I felt bad, though. Amused by my sulking, Reuben retreated into his study to finish the call in private. As soon as the door shut, I leaned back to verify he wasn't in sight, then stood and finished cleaning up our breakfast dishes. She was just more sneaky about it. A frown passed over my face as I carried things around the edge of the bar and into the kitchen. I couldn't say how long it would last, this little bubble I was hiding in. I would be fortunate if it was permanent, but I knew it couldn't be. In the moments Reuben chatted about other things, I could almost forget the sword hanging above my head, ready to fall at the slightest shake-up. But when I was alone, it became ever present in my thoughts, a specter that grew in size the longer I tried to ignore it. Are we... Yep, we're back around. Cool. Right, we're not going to be like, this reminds me of when we went for brunch that one time, because we never did. I'm fine. This place reminds me a little of a spot I liked in Cisalis. I guess that got me thinking about everything else and the lack of developments. I expected Endgame to... do something by now? There we go. Ugh. Asserting claims. Most likely. Though if they're going to base their claim on my being a clear and present danger, I'm not sure how that will work out. I'm not exactly endangering anyone right now.
Assuming that's their strategy.
I think that, given Cerna's laws and my current status, they'll probably try to force the matter of training and registration.
I agree. That seems more reasonable.
So if I have to do some sort of training to prove I can exist among the common folk without causing mayhem...
I'd argue you've caused very little mayhem in all your time among us mere mortals.
But it still seems like a battle they would feel they could win in the court of public opinion. And, like you said, the only real training facility happens to be at their headquarters, right?
Well, there are the long-distance training courses for lower ranks that slip through the cracks.
I think they'd argue those won't suffice for someone of my level.
I agree.
So most likely they'd use training as an excuse to get me to Corsolaris. And what are the chances that I could actually ever leave Corsolaris should Endgame get me there?
Slim, I would assume. Officially, of course, your stay would be temporary, but I imagine they'd find a way to keep you there once they have you. They would say it's too dangerous for you to leave, your psi is unstable, or they'd find ways to delay your training and fabricate whatever reason they can. Of course, that's assuming they attempt to force the issue rather than convincing you to go there.
Okay, we're back. Nice. Ah, and we're back. We're on our first case again already. Cool. Let's see how things go from an analytical perspective. Focusing on that, the method behind gathering evidence almost made me forget where I was. It was interesting to see their approach. It somewhat reminded me of the way we might approach an archaeological site as well. Poring over it like a grid, marking off areas of interest, drawing initial conclusions, and logging everything we observed. It was logical that crime scene investigation would be similar, but I suppose I'd just not considered the possible overlap until I saw it in person. It was interesting in a way, but also sad. Archaeology dealt with human lives and the remains of those lives, and we always had to respect that. But there was so much chronological distance between us and the events we were exploring. That made emotional separation easier. What happened here was new. I admired their ability to put that aside and do their jobs. That's an interesting parallel she drew there. Very interesting indeed. Oh yeah, it's about Winter seeing his fair share of crime scenes. More than enough? He can't be that much older than me.
He came to the Esper crime unit about 3 years ago.
Have you two been partners since then?
Pretty much.
That still wasn't that long. I hope he doesn't have to juggle too many questions about me. Okay. I just don't want to inconvenience either of you with all this. I mean, people are clearly annoyed. Jackson and his team...
We'll get over it. Morgan, as of right now, you are doing the exact opposite of inconveniencing us. None of the other witnesses saw the suspect's face, but you say you got a clear look at it. That's a lead we didn't expect to have. Not while the victim is unconscious. We'll manage whoever's annoyed. It's our fault for bringing an Esper to the scene without notifying anyone. You were never meant to be working or doing consulting, much less witnessing a violent attack on someone else. I can't believe we exposed you to something like that. All of that's on us. On me.
Or I should have...
No. Ugh. Let's not rehash this. For now, I just want to get you back to the office, okay?
Yeah. Interesting. A little argument there in the hall about who's more at fault. Seemed less shaken up. Less shaken up, huh? I suppose it's because I only witnessed the argument leading up to whatever happened in that back room, and that let me push away any thought of what followed. It's easier to compartmentalize, I think, than it would be if I had seen anything more than that. I'm focusing on that for now, and trying to not focus on the meaninglessness? This guy just broke into someone's flat and attacked them like it was nothing. Who does that? I can't quite wrap my head around it.
Violence is always meaningless. We'll find out what this guy's story is, but it obviously doesn't change what he did.
The thing is, I would be lying if I denied a selfish part of myself is frustrated over the fact we wouldn't be having this conversation if I wasn't an Esper in the first place. But my struggle feels like such a minuscule problem in light of the fact that someone else had a much worse day today.
Someone else's bad day doesn't invalidate your problems.
You don't have to invalidate a problem to put it into perspective.
Listen, I understand it's not what you wanted for your life, but I'll be honest here. I don't know why you're so determined to hate everything to do with Psi. I don't have any at all, so I suppose I'm not an expert. I only enjoyed a few years of having Psi at the planetary standard as a kid before the nanite resistance set in.
Okay, so that conversation was mostly the same? Okay, so I think this is when he's like, we kind of want to hire you. But, of course, you have reservations.
I have issues with making you do work I know full well you never wanted to do, yes. And I have issues with the approach of having to prove your worth in the first place. Look at what happened today. You were pretty shaken by what you saw.
Oddly, Winter says I was less shaken than he expected.
Well, I guess Winter likes to find the silver lining. You were distraught, and it should never have happened. But now Phil wants to have you actively working on similar things. Worse things. So yeah, I'm worried. You see the absolute worst of society in this line of work, Morgan. It's hard. Even if it's temporary, a few weeks, a few months, long enough to prove a point. It won't be easy.
He was right, of course, and his concerns were similar to mine, but... Okay. I feel we're gonna do cautious. Yep, we're gonna need some time this time around. I think... I just need time to contemplate it first. Before I talk to anyone. Before I sign contracts. I looked down, fiddling with the edge of my shirt as I chewed my lower lip. It wasn't a bad idea, but I needed to go through and consider the larger implications, the pros and cons. I could see the benefit to Reuben's department, obviously, but I needed to think about what this meant for me. None of this had been on the agenda for today. Not crime scenes, nor visions, and being an Esper consultant. Getting to Nutpal's good graces didn't seem like a bad idea, though.
You can take your time with it. There's no need to rush a decision.
Thank you. I just don't want to decide in a rush and realize we missed something later.
Of course not. I don't want that either. Maybe I should have waited until later to bring it up. I don't want you to feel pressured.
No, don't worry about that. Sometimes I just need to sit down and make a few lists before I can decide things.
That's more than fair.
To be clear, I'm okay with registering so you can use my help for this case today. That part is obviously fine. The contract... we can hold off on, maybe?
Okay. We'll get the registration taken care of before we leave, then. The good news is that it's also the first step if you decide to move forward with the contract, and the process is also simple. It won't take long at all.
Good to know, and... ooh... any affection here? No affection! Ah, this was like a hidden affection choice. Yeah, tell Phil I said thanks! I know Phil is thinking about the benefit to your department, but I am grateful to him for maybe thinking about my situation too. So, please tell him I said thank you for considering me despite my bumbling management of the situation today.
It was hardly bumbling, but I'll tell him. Despite how he acts, he's a good man. He has a niece your age, so I'm sure he's thinking about what her options would be like were she in your shoes.
Aw, that's kinda sweet.
Finding a way to help you stay out of Endgame is something he's surprisingly passionate about, all our frustrations with him aside. If you're working with us, you can show others that Espers fit into more places than Endgame. More than that, you can show Endgame you don't need their training to exist without causing problems. That's kind of his thought process, I think. But I believe he'll be understanding whatever your decision is. He has no illusions about this not being your preferred career path. So seriously, don't feel pressured. You don't have to jump on the first opportunity that presents itself.
I know that. And thank you for just... presenting the facts and options. It gives me a lot to think about.
Of course. I just want you to find something you're happy with. That's all.
Thank you anyway. With that, we decided to focus on getting my registration taken care of for the time being. Alright. This twist in my path was... something that would take time getting used to. Now that I was alone and finally had time to myself. I wasn't confident the consultant thing would work out the way we thought. Doubt gnawed at me. What if it just locked me into a different path I didn't want? Would there ever be a point I could say I wanted to go back to school or hop off world to dig up ancient ruins? I kept circling back to that worry. But as much as I tried to avoid complicated decisions for fear of making the wrong choice, I already knew what I'd decide because my options were limited. If I didn't take this opportunity to wrest some control of my situation back, I was choosing to be stuck in limbo. I couldn't just sit around and wait, weaponless, for Endgame to decide which issue they wanted to force. Even if I had time to consider all the pros and cons and potential future outcomes, I wasn't sure my situation had enough clarity to look that far ahead. And the real problem was the lack of time. We didn't know when Endgame would show up citing some regulation to get me to Core Solaris. So I needed to roadblock that as quickly as I could. And this was my only option, wasn't it? I had to take it. And do my absolute best to not second-guess myself every step of the way. I tell Reuben we could move forward with the contract, and I'd become a full-time Esper consultant for his division. No more trying to avoid the new reality. I was a queen rank. Nothing would undo it. Certainly not pretending as long as I didn't use these abilities, they'd go away. They were a part of life now. Today had proved that beyond any doubt. When I finally made my way to the living room, Reuben was leaning against the back of the sofa. He was just ending a call with Winter from the sound of it, and smiled at me the moment he disconnected.
Hey there. Feeling better?
A little, thanks. Was that Winter just now?
Yeah, he was giving an update. Looks like they've made an arrest.
So soon?
Thanks to your lead, yeah.
My lead. I looked down, running my teeth over my lower lip. I was curious about the details, but it probably wasn't my place to ask, if he'd even share it with me. Reuben, I did some thinking, and I'll do it. The consultant thing.
Oh. Are you sure?
Pretty sure, yeah. As sure as I can be, I guess.
That doesn't sound all that sure, Morgan.
He came to me, setting his hands on my shoulders. I was almost getting used to that worried look on his face. I think it's the correct course of action, so I'm going to take it, uncertainties and all.
All right. It's your call. I'll let Phil know, and we can go over the contract whenever you're ready.
I'm ready anytime. There's no reason to delay it at this point. In fact, it's probably better to do it as soon as possible.
Okay. How about this? I was thinking takeout for dinner. So maybe we can decide on that and look over the contract while we wait for it to be delivered.
Takeout? Should I be mortified to learn you don't always cook wholesome, healthy meals for yourself?
I'm sure my father would be. I'd hope you're a little more realistic.
I suppose I can forgive it just this once. Only once, though.
Right. I'll remember that next time we're both too tired to cook. Morgan, you know, today you...
He trailed off, looking away as his expression went serious again. Serious and strangely uncertain. What is it?
You handled yourself well today.
Did I? I feel like I didn't.
No, you handled it better than many people. Maybe you're too stubborn to stay upset for long, or to let yourself linger over things too long. That's been true of this whole situation. It's been a big shakeup, but you've continued to move forward through it all, no matter what gets thrown at you. Just... today in particular, I think you did well.
I doubt I'd have made it far in New Albion without at least some persistence. Today was just about doing what I needed to do.
Maybe. But I still think that... well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, even if you say it that way, you helped a lot. We can't undo what happened today, but at least we got the person who did it. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to linger on negative things. I just wanted you to know.
He cleared his throat and smiled again.
Let's take care of dinner first. I don't think the contract will take too much time, so if we're lucky, perhaps it'll be taken care of before the food arrives. Anything in particular you like food-wise?
I'll let you decide if you don't mind. I don't know what's nearby or what's good, and I don't think I had the brain power to devote to it.
No problem. I'll take care of it.
He motioned me to the sofa, and I sat there while he made quick work of ordering dinner, then joined me so we could discuss the consultant contract. He was right that it wasn't complicated. We weren't quite finished by the time food arrived, but it was signed and set up in short order afterwards. The road was diverging from what I'd thought, but it felt like things were moving again. I had yet to decide if that was good or bad, so I would just have to do my best to make sure it was good.